The rain fell in heavy sheets across New Seattle's lower district, washing the grime from chrome buildings that touched the clouds. In the shadows of humanity's greatest achievements, Caitlin huddled beneath a broken awning, her elongated fingers trembling as she clutched her torn cloak closer to her crystalline skin. She was Velhari, one of the proud navigators who had once charted courses between stars. Now she was just another refugee on Earth, another alien displaced by the Dominion War that had ravaged half the galaxy. Her people's homeworld was ash, their fleet scattered. And she was alone on a planet that had taken in millions but could barely see them as anything more than numbers. The tears came unbidden, mixing with the rain that pelted her face. Her skin, which should have glowed with bioluminescence, remained dull and gray, a physical manifestation of her despair. No one stopped. Humans rushed past with their umbrellas and raincoats, their eyes sliding over her as if she were just another fixture of the street. "Excuse me, miss?" The voice was small, pitched high with youth and innocence. Caitlin looked down to find a human child standing before her, a girl no more than 7 years old, with dark hair plastered to her forehead by the rain. She wore a yellow raincoat with ducks on it, and she was staring up at Caitlin with eyes full of concern. "Are you okay?" the child asked. Caitlin tried to speak, but her voice came out as a warble. Her translator implant had stopped working weeks ago when she could no longer afford the maintenance fees. She gestured helplessly, more tears streaming down her face. The little girl tilted her head, studying Caitlin with the kind of unfiltered attention that only children possessed. Then she reached out and gently touched Caitlin's hand. The Velhari woman flinched, expecting rejection or disgust, but the child's grip was warm and steady. "I think I need to hug you," the girl said simply, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. Before Caitlin could react, small arms wrapped around her waist. The hug was fierce and genuine, offered without hesitation or prejudice. Something broke inside Caitlin's chest, some dam she'd built to contain her grief, and she found herself sobbing openly, her hands hovering uncertainly before finally settling on the child's shoulders. "Sarah! Sarah, there you are!" A man came running through the rain, his face etched with panic. He was in his mid-30s, dressed in the simple clothes of a working-class human, and when he saw his daughter embracing the alien woman, he slowed to a stop. Stephen approached cautiously, taking in the scene. He saw the broken translator implant, the tattered clothes, the way this alien woman was crying like her heart was shattered. He saw his daughter, fearless and compassionate, offering comfort to a stranger who needed it. "Sarah," he said gently, "what are you doing?" "She's sad, Daddy," Sarah replied without releasing her hold on Caitlin. "She needs a hug." Stephen knelt down in the rain beside them. Up close, he could see the signs of malnutrition, the exhaustion in the alien woman's large, luminous eyes. He'd heard about the refugee crisis, seen the news reports about overcrowded shelters and failing support systems. But this was the first time he'd really seen it, really looked at one of these displaced souls and recognized the depth of their suffering. "Can you understand me?" Stephen asked softly. Caitlin shook her head, pointing to her broken implant. Stephen nodded slowly, then did something that surprised even himself. He reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and support. "Come with us," he said, knowing she couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his meaning. He mimed eating, pointed to himself and Sarah, then gestured down the street. Caitlin's eyes widened. She shook her head frantically, backing away slightly. She knew what charity looked like, and she'd learned the hard way that nothing came free. She didn't want pity. She didn't want to be a burden. But Sarah grabbed her hand again, looking up at her with that innocent determination. "Please," the little girl said. "You're cold and wet. We can help." There was something about the way the child looked at her. Not with pity, but with genuine care. That made Caitlin's resistance crumble. She nodded slowly, and Sarah's face lit up with a smile that seemed to chase away some of the gloom. Stephen's apartment was small and cluttered, the home of a single father doing his best to raise a daughter on a mechanic's salary. But it was warm and dry, and that was everything. He gave Caitlin towels and found old clothes that might fit her different physiology. While she cleaned up, he heated soup on the stove and watched Sarah draw pictures at the kitchen table. "Why did you hug her, sweetheart?" he asked his daughter. Sarah looked up from her drawing, a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands. "Because she was crying, Daddy. When I'm sad, you hug me and it helps. I thought it might help her too." Stephen felt his throat tighten. Sometimes children understood things that adults had forgotten. That kindness didn't require a common language. That compassion was universal. That a simple gesture of humanity could mean everything to someone who'd lost hope. When Caitlin emerged, cleaned up but still visibly fragile, Stephen gestured to the table. They ate together in comfortable silence, Sarah chattering away even though Caitlin couldn't understand her words. But the Velhari woman smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months, her skin beginning to show faint traces of its natural glow. After dinner, Stephen pulled out his old tablet and spent an hour researching refugee services, translation apps, and community support programs. He made calls, sent messages, pulled in every favor he could from friends and neighbors. By the time Sarah had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up against Caitlin's side, he had found a path forward, a temporary translator, a contact at a refugee shelter that wasn't overcrowded, an interview for a position at the spaceport where Caitlin's navigation skills would be valued. It wasn't much, not a solution to all her problems, but it was a start. It was hope. Caitlin watched the human man work on her behalf, this stranger who owed her nothing, and she finally understood what she'd been missing about Earth. Yes, humanity was chaotic and messy, often too busy to stop and see the suffering around them. But they were also capable of extraordinary kindness when their hearts were touched. They were a species that could look at the universe as displaced and broken, and instead of turning away, could offer a hand up. As Stephen drove her to the shelter later that night, the rain had stopped. Above them, stars were visible through breaks in the clouds, stars that Caitlin had once navigated between, stars that had seemed so distant and cold these past months. But now, holding the contact information Stephen had written down for her, wearing clothes that smelled of human fabric softener, and remembering the fierce hug of a 7-year-old girl who had simply seen someone in pain and wanted to help, those stars seemed a little closer, a little warmer. Maybe, Caitlin thought, this strange planet called Earth could become home after all. Not because humanity was perfect, but because even in their imperfection they could still choose kindness. They could still choose to see. They could still choose to care. And sometimes that was enough to light even the darkest night.